Welcome. I am pleased to announce the conclusion of the Rapid Response Strike Force appointed by Governor Sisolak to identify issues and make recommendations regarding the state's unemployment system. I was honored to be appointed to lead the Rapid Response Strike Force to examine our system. The first task when appointed by Governor Sisolak was to find a new acting director for DETR. The previous acting director had stepped down after threats on her life. To our great pleasure, Elisa Caffaretta agreed to take the helm. I have worked side by side with her over the past 5 months, and I am pleased that she was appointed permanent director this past week by Governor Sisolak. She is the right person for the job, and I have been impressed by her dedication to this department over these past 5 months. Our second task was to create the Volunteer Strike Force. I want to thank the Strike Force members, and a number of them are here on this call. Vanessa Alpers, David Axtell, Elisa Caffaretta, Alan Cunningham, Steve Fisher, Anthony Pearl, Mike Schmidt, and Chuck Short. These talented team members brought with them a variety of skills in analyzing systems, backlogs, understanding IT, fraud. They brought perspectives from the state system, from the private sector. They're problem solvers that care about the state, and they made this journey much more enjoyable and productive because of their skills and talents. Over the last 5 months, we have spent hundreds of hours analyzing our unemployment system and offering solutions, many of which were implemented immediately and others which can be implemented over the long term. A few highlights. First, key leadership positions inside DETR and the Employment Security Division. Save for one contract employee, key leadership positions in the department and the division were either filled with inexperienced leaders or vacant. You can't run an operation in crisis without steady, accomplished leadership at the helm. Since that time, every leadership position has been filled. Of course, with Elisa at the helm, Deputy Director of DETR, a new ESD Administrator, Linda Parvin, 1 COO, 2 new Deputy Administrators, and 2 new Chiefs. I've had the opportunity to work beside them over the last several months, and they're a talented team. The second key issue that we found, insufficient staff to process claims. Some baseline numbers. We've prepared a pretty exhaustive report, 38 pages. It'll be posted on the website. If you look at page 20 of that report, you'll see a lot of the baseline numbers. So from March 15th to July 31st, that's the time when the strike force began, 191 regular UI claims were filed. During that same period, 344,691 PUA claims were filed. By August, we had over 300,000 claims being processed, and you can compare that to a pre-COVID level of 20,000. Remarkably, at least 1 week of benefits was paid to over 500,000 claimants. By December 31st, 1.5 million claims were filed. When the strike force began, there were 245,765 claims in the backlog. 26,470 were in the UI part of the house, and 217,197 were in the PUA backlog. The division was certain that most of the PUA claims were fraudulent, but legitimate Nevadans were caught in that pile. At the time of the pandemic, ESD had 181 employees. By August, there were 362 employees, not counting the Alorica contracted staff. But still, there were not enough staff to process the cases, and hiring in the state system takes time. At that time, Steve Fisher, administrator of the welfare division, suggested adding welfare eligibility workers to the mix. He thought they were already trained to process claims in accordance with sometimes arcane federal law. They were already in the state system. So they joined the effort. It's the first time in the state's history that this was ever even considered, much less undertaken. And 200 state employees joined the effort. From the time they were hired through last Friday, they processed 88,064 cases, a remarkable amount of work. Today, the backlog also can be seen on page 20 of the report. For the UI cases that were there when we started, the backlog is now 0 of those who had monetary eligibility, meaning claimants could get money. On the PUA side, there are 16,000 left from that original 217,000. And it's believed that all of these are fraudulent because none have yet uploaded documents. At the same time, ESD continued hiring. So today, there are 746 employees now attacking the claims. A note about the current status of claims. As you clear a backlog, of course, more claims roll in. The difference now, of course, today is that you have more staff and more automated systems to process them. If you turn to page 21 on our report, you can see the current backlog, the current number of cases that are awaiting, and our recommendations to resolve them. So, for example, in PUA, there are 7,709 cases with documents uploaded, meaning the claimants took time to follow the instructions and upload their documents. At the state's current resolution rate, we estimate that 3,083 will be eligible. With the current processing rate of 5,000 a week, the welfare staff can clear this remainder by February 7th. We're recommending then that the state mass resolve the other cases where no proof of identity exists and no documents were uploaded, completing the PUA backlog by February 7th. For UI, there are 26,353 cases pending more than 8 weeks. We suggest that when the PUA backlog is cleared, that the welfare workers be transferred to the regular UI cases, assuming they're the same resolution rate of 5,000 a month. When they join the current UI staff, which are processing 8,000 a week, 5,000 a week for the welfare workers, the ESD workers are processing 8,000 a week. We estimate that the UI cases can be cleared in 2 months. As you can tell, in ascertaining workload and backlog, the Strike Force did a number of things. We cataloged the claims along with DETR staff. We assigned staff. We tracked resolution and processing rates to ensure that claimants received a more timely answer. We recommend those same approaches continue. The next area I'd like to address, in addition to leadership, claims processing, and the backlog, is fraud. Much has been said about fraud in the unemployment system, but to put it in some perspective, more applications have been filed than are people in the state's workforce. That means hundreds of thousands of fraudulent claims. Nevada is not unique. Our identities have been stolen and are being sold on the dark web. That means for the first time, the fraud that is being seen in unemployment offices is not claimants fudging, trying to get an extra week of benefits, but criminals who have your name, address, social security number, and date of birth, and who are filing claims in real people's names. When this first happened and the system was besieged, it really stalled everything. And that is when the governor appointed the strike force. When the strike force began, again, there were a large number of claims in the backlog. The division thought they were fraudulent, but what to do about it. So the strike force helped. Member Mike Schmidt ran analyses to compare the list of claimants to other databases to determine authenticity. New technologies were then rolled out. New vendors were selected. Because this fraud is nationwide, there's a number of vendors who are getting into this business of identifying who the real folks are, putting these systems in place at the front end. So a new contract has been entered into by DETR along with existing contracts, and more will be layered on because this is not a problem that's going to go away. All state systems will have to get ready. Private sector systems will have to get ready because of the massive level of ID fraud that is going around our nation. So while much still needs to be done to keep one step ahead of these criminal rings, DETR is no longer stalled by these criminal networks and are using these technologies to get benefits to the true Nevadans who are waiting. But the workload that's been created by this, you have claimants calling, the real claimants not being able to get benefits because a fraudulent claim has been filed in their name. Then you have to make sure the person calling is the real person. And so the amount of time having to be spent on these cases one by one is truly a problem. And I'm very hopeful that the Department of Justice and that the FBI cyber task investigators are going to begin taking a larger role because the same criminal networks are targeting every state. The next topic I want to talk about is system modernization. The computer system serving ESD is slow and outdated. It's been unable to keep up with the volume of claims. As a result, a decision was made early on to outsource the PUA computer system, which brought its own set of challenges. There was recently an analysis done on the system, and it concluded that the system relies on highly complex, costly, third-party products that require extensive maintenance. They're brittle with tons of workarounds. It needs to be replaced. In the meantime, we have two systems that don't talk to each other. So modernization needs to occur. The other problem with these systems is they don't report great case management reports, tools that can be utilized in prioritizing claims. The reports produced by the UI system, they count issues. One claim may have 6 issues. Well, if you're trying to sort out the backlog, you want to know how many people are in it, not how many issues are in it. It keeps track of fraudulent folks who are in the system. again, just making it really cumbersome. When you're looking at a system inundated with claims, you want to be able to sort them, catalog them, prioritize them, and process them. The computer systems made that extremely difficult, and the Strike Force is recommending replacement. The last topic I want to focus on is improving the claimant experience and better crisis planning. So the system uses complex forms, confusing instructions, there's not enough claimant updates, you have PUA not talking to UI, two separate systems. These were just some of the complaints that the Strike Force heard. By October, ESD staff began cross-training all the welfare employees on both PUA and UI. And some of the PUA staff also were trained that way, so they can see both systems so that we're not shuttling people back and forth. Social media efforts were improved. We recommend that a business process review be implemented, looking at every step of the process, looking at things that were added to the process perhaps decades ago that no longer make sense. Have a real claimant look at the forms and give feedback on whether they're understandable. These are things that can improve the system and make it better. Those 5 areas were probably the highlights of the report, but we really looked and touched it on just about every aspect of the operation. We were planning on sticking around, studying the system within 60 days, 90 days, but honestly, one of the biggest problems facing the system was a lack of staff power and being so far behind. So our team decided to stick around to offer suggestions, solutions, meeting weekly, and not just have this, study be put on a report, but actually be implemented. A number of the recommendations have already been implemented, and some will come in the future. It was my honor to serve the governor and the state over these last several months. While much still needs to be done, we are proud that a new leadership team is now in place. An innovative staff plan was implemented. The initial backlog was virtually eliminated, and anti-fraud measures were installed, and that a future backlog elimination plan was formed to reduce cases filed after the Strike Force was formed. While many challenges remain, with the new department leadership in place, we are confident that the department will meet those challenges and continue to serve Nevadans in need. Nevadans deserve no less. With that, I'll ask Elisa to also make a few comments.
Good morning. Thank you, Barbara. I want to make sure you can hear me first. And I'll keep going. Okay, great. So I wanted to start by thanking Barbara Buckley and the Strike Force for their incredible dedication and hard work. This was a really great team with folks from the public and private sector, and they volunteered. I think they thought they were volunteering, as Barbara said, for a month or two to take a good look, and they ended up digging very deep into the complexities of unemployment law processes and systems, and they truly did give hundreds of hours to this complicated cause. I wish that we could share the story of every one of the thousands and thousands of Nevadans who eventually got a determination or a resolution, or who got their full allotment of benefits that they were entitled to or continue to receive, because that's really what we're all in this for. That really was the goal, is getting people an answer and getting eligible claimants paid. On the behalf of all of those claimants who we serve, I want to thank the Strike Force again for their work in sort of getting this process unstuck, as Barbara described it. And I want to especially thank Barbara Buckley, who recruited and led this really all-star effort. You don't get this level of commitment from volunteers and engagement without a talented and trusted leader, and we really couldn't have done it without you. So thank you again, Barbara. This was an amazing work to be involved with. And we are going to miss you, and we will call you every once in a while when we have a specific question where we can use your expertise. So of course the question is, what is next for DETR? As Barbara noted, even though we're almost done with the backlog, we have thousands more applications to process as they continue to come in. So our plan is has several points to it that I'll share with you. First of all, as we've discussed, we do have a few more probably weeks or months to get current. And our goal is to get current and stay current on the claims processes. So we will continue the weekly backlog elimination meetings to keep track of our progress, redeploy staff and resources where they are needed most, and as we say, get current and stay current on the claims processing. The second thing that we are committed to, which we haven't talked about in detail in this press conference, but is ongoing, is making sure claimants receive all of the benefits that they are entitled to. And as you know, Congress continues to pass new legislation which provides additional benefits. So currently that means finalizing the computer programming and the regulations we need so that people can get the extensions that Congress passed in the Continued Assistance Act. Specifically, we're still working with the Department of Labor so we can implement the pandemic emergency unemployment compensation, which is extra weeks, without cutting into or eliminating some of these state extended benefit weeks that claimants can get. So we want to make sure they get all of the weeks they are entitled to. We are also working on updating the programming for new PUA applications to make sure they comply with the new documentation requirements in the law. So that work is ongoing. The third area of focus is leveling up our efforts to address fraud. As Barbara noted, this continues to be a huge issue for us. So we are upgrading our technology and our staffing solutions to prevent fraud before it happens, as well as working with law enforcement to investigate and prosecute fraud after it occurs, and to reclaim those funds where we possibly can. The fourth area that we're focused on is to start doing more to get people back to work. There is some good news in our economy. It's still mixed for Nevada, but people are going back to jobs. So we are working on being as innovative as we can in connecting people to the workforce services that we currently provide online, and we're expanding those services as well, because we want to make sure people have the skills and supports they need to return to their jobs or new jobs. And finally, as Barbara mentioned, modernizing the computer system is a key priority for us all. I think many of you know the governor's budget does include some funds to invest in computer programmers, software and hardware that we need to take immediate action to stabilize our computer systems in a way that will allow us to speed up processing and increase the system security as we face these ongoing attacks. And we're also working with the governor's office based on this recommendation to find the funds and develop an RFP to thoroughly modernize the system in the next 2 to 3 years. And to wrap up my remarks, I would be remiss if I didn't recognize the amazing, amazing work of the DETR staff throughout this entire crisis. The state and the agency were hit with unemployment numbers that have never been seen by any state ever. That was followed by a tsunami of applications and unrelenting attacks by fraudulent actors. The DETR staff have been putting in overtime for months, giving up their nights and weekends, sort of an unending attempt to get caught up on the backlog. They've been subject to some pretty harsh criticism, and yet they've stuck it out. So, and they've done that to make sure that every week, week in and week out, about 300,000 Nevada families have been getting their unemployment benefits. And the DETR staff, through it all, made sure that over $8.3 billion in unemployment benefits have gone out to Nevadans in need. So there's certainly much more to do, but I know that this incredible staff is going to continue to show up, and we will get it done. Those are my remarks, and I think we are ready to take questions.
This is Rosa. Just a couple of reminders to all of our attendees. Please remember to be courteous of everyone's time. Go ahead and ask your initial question and then allow for others to ask their initial questions. Thank you. Go ahead.
Rosa, will you be calling on people, or would you like me to do that?
That's fine. I'm trying to watch the chat.
Oh, okay. I'm following the raised hands.
So Joe Mueller saying they can't unmute themselves, it looks like.
There we go. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, Joe, we can.
There we go. All right. Thank you so much. Two pretty simple questions here. One is to do with I know you talked about the systems and software and technology and everything. Obviously, the phones have been an issue throughout the past. What is being done to address that and get phone lines operating at a better capacity? And then also, I know we talked about this in the past with the backlog. Some people have fell through the cracks and are still waiting. I've obviously been in contact with some of those people. Is there a system being constructed to address those people who might have fallen through the cracks who are still waiting?
Yes, so taking your second question first, for those who are still waiting, there are plans to get through every single case. When those folks call the call centers, their claims are elevated and given to an adjudicator, and they're resolving those cases. At the same time, any claim that hasn't had a determination is going to one of the 200 welfare workers to resolve. So our hope by that February deadline is that every PUA case in the backlog will have a determination, because the 200 extra workers have been going through them one at a time. They've finished 88,000. We estimate that there are 2,000 to 3,000 left who are owed benefits. Those will be next to be resolved. With regard to the phone system, if we can solve people's problems, they won't need to call as much. If there's claimant communication through the media, through releases, they won't have to call as much. The response times have gotten better. They are still not where they need to be. And I'll tee that over to Elisa to talk about what she thinks is on the horizon for the overwhelmed phone systems.
Yeah, so the phone systems, it's not the systems themselves, it's also a staffing issue, of course. And so I think Barbara outlined the highlights of the best things we can do is resolve cases, get people the answers that they need. We are also working on a frequently asked questions chatbot feature, which should be able to help provide just basic information to claimants without needing to call into the call center. One of the things we've seen happening in the call volume is every time Congress passes a new law and there are new benefits, extra weeks, the additional payments, people start calling to say, when will I see it? And so that sort of overwhelms the call center for a while as we get through those calls. So if the program features will stabilize and we can just be paying people's benefits, that's going to help. And again, as we've talked about, you know, the best thing we can do is keep redeploying the staff to the place where they can kind of get through backlog, and then fewer people will have questions. So that is the plan, to add some more staff as we can to the call centers to get to those calls more quickly.
Thank you, Joe. Next up is we have a question from Michelle Rindles. Go ahead, Michelle. Please remember to unmute yourself.
Sorry, can you hear me now? You guys have reported specific numbers from the backlog in today's report. Do you expect to be able to quantify the backlog of claims and publicly report that information kind of on a regular, potentially weekly basis going forward?
Obviously, I'll tee that over to Elisa, but just from an outsider's point of view, it is extremely time-consuming to do that. It has to be done by hand because the computer systems don't produce the data that you need. So if you're going to do that, it's going to take tons of hours, and the first priority is to try to get through cases and pay people. So, you know, my recommendation would probably be periodic updates, as opposed to trying to do it every week. When we started, I tried to do a dashboard, right? I thought that, you know, they're doing it in other systems, and I thought it would be just a great feature to add. Wow. I mean, it just proved impossible to do that regularly, again, because the system is producing issues. Well, people don't want to know how many issues are pending. They want to know how many people are pending. So, Elisa, I don't know what your future plans are with regard to that.
Yeah, I would say, you know, we have a lot of reporting responsibilities to the federal government for all of the funding streams that we have. So we are doing regular reports to the Department of Labor. They, as Barbara said, they don't match sort of things that normal people would be interested in, you know, sort of issues resolved or number of issues that we have in certain categories is not what people are interested in. I do believe that there are, when we get current, there are certain performance measures that DETR has used traditionally, which I think which are in the system, which we can report on a regular basis. For example, what week of claims are you working on? When you have literally 500,000 claims that came in sort of in May and June, you're processing May and June claims for a long time, and that's not really a meaningful number of your progress. But once we get current, that will actually be sort of a very understandable standard that we can report on a regular basis. So I agree with Barbara. I thought one of the first things we were going to do was the dashboard, and that proved to be you know, just one more thing it's a lot more complicated than it sounds.
Thank you. Okay, the next we have up is Darcy Spears. Darcy, go ahead and ask your question and unmute yourself.
Okay, can you guys hear me okay? I'm trying,
Yes, I heard that.
Okay, good, sorry about that. Thank you for taking my question. Looking for updates, one on the appeals process and one on the Bank of America debit card issue. Perhaps you can address the appeals process first. And I'm just kind of looking for a general update on that. Like, how many are waiting adjudication? What's the wait time? How are people being updated? How many have been resolved in claimant's favors? Can you give me kind of a bucket response to what's going on with the appeals?
Sure. Lisa, do you want to do that, or would you like me to?
Sure. The appeals process is moving forward, and we're still using the same process in PUA. So a lot of folks, you can appeal any determination that's been made by DETR. And what we found is that folks have filed a lot of appeals, sometimes when there was not even a determination, just wanting someone to look at their claim. So the first step of the process is adjudicators are reviewing all of those claims to see if they can just be resolved, or if there's actually something that needs to go to an appeals referee. We currently have, I believe, the last set of numbers I heard was about 900 legitimate deduplicated appeals in PUA to be scheduled, and about 900 something in UI to be scheduled. Our appeals referees are hearing those. 1 week they hear UI cases, 1 week they hear PUA cases. So they're getting through 100 to 200 a week. So we've got about a little more than a month's worth of hearings to go through, but we are getting through those.
On appeals, I would add that 10 additional people are being added to the appeals effort next week. Just as a sample kind of week, I'll take the week of January 11th. 723 appeals were reviewed. 568 were either redetermined and paid, the appeal was withdrawn, or it was determined not to be a valid appeal, leaving 155 to be scheduled. And that's a fairly typical week in terms of processing. So with 10 more people being added, obviously that is going to produce a much quicker process. And by February 15th, it's also anticipated that more hearing officers will be added. So when you have a huge backlog and you make a huge push to resolve the cases, the next part of the system that gets backed up is appeals. So that is going to be receiving more and more attention, so all of those can be resolved. Debit cards, I'll kick that to you, Elisa.
The process with the debit cards is that there are the People's Bank of America debit cards can be frozen for a couple of reasons, either a fraud determination on DETR's side, or Bank of America has found a hallmark of fraud from their system, and their process is different than ours. So folks need to call our call centers and determine if it's something we can release. We send over a list of claims that have been released every day to the Bank of America, and then they have to lift the fraud because they have to unfreeze the cards because they're not our cards, they're Bank of America's cards. In some cases, if it was a determination that was made by the Bank of America because their fraud unit or their hallmarks have triggered it, it needs to be released by the Bank of America. We know that's a complicated process for folks, and we are working on resolving that. And my understanding right now is that Bank of America does have a backlog in terms of unfreezing cards. I think we've provided some of you with information about their press team, because we can't answer questions for them about the backlog that they have.
Thank you so much. So we've got just time for a couple more questions. We did get one from an anonymous individual. It says, how will DETR continue to incorporate claimant advocates to keep advocating for Nevadans in the future to make sure that the unemployment claim process is more transparent to us.
Looks like Barbara's typing an answer to that.
I was starting to, but then I realized if I type, I can't talk and listen.
There you go. So it has been one of the recommendations of the Strike Force to create a position to advocate for and communicate with our claimants. We have identified a person who will take on that task as part of their duties. As you know, we can't just create a brand new position in the agency without going through the state process. But we have found someone to at least take that on initially, and we're going to be meeting with and talking with the governor's office about the recommendations in the report. We just received. We've seen drafts, but we've just received the final version. So we'll come up with some action steps out of the report in terms of how do we implement all of these recommendations. So we may have an update for you on creating a position or designating an existing position to handle those responsibilities. And we do think it's been very helpful to have information about clients' experiences. Sometimes they'll see something happening in the computer system that we don't have any other way of seeing, and their examples allow us to go to the vendor and resolve the issue. So it's been very valuable, and we believe we need to keep that information coming into DETR.
Thank you, Director. And then the final question is a follow-up question from Michelle Windles. And she says, DETR said it has partially implemented the extensions and changes from the late December COVID relief bill. What is left to do, and what groups of claimants may be missing or unpaid right now?
So I mentioned this in when I talked about our second priority, which is making sure all claimants receive all the benefits that they are entitled to. One of the things that the Continued Assistance Act did was it added 11 weeks to whatever program, almost every program that folks could be in. So UI, PUA, but it also added 11 weeks to the PEUC, which is the additional weeks that have been given in UI in recognition of how long this pandemic has lasted. And those extended benefits, the PEUC extended benefits, also then have to be, you get those weeks, and then once those exhaust, you go to state extended benefit weeks. I know this is kind of a long answer, but so we are still working out with the Department of Labor what the sequence is of how you get your PEUC weeks and then go to state extended benefit weeks, because we have to get the order right so that we don't cut off your state extended benefit weeks inadvertently by putting you in the wrong system at the wrong time. So that has been a more complicated dance than we might hope, and we're still working out the details on that. So and the worst part, of course, is the people who are in those lines are the ones who, you know, are exhausting their benefits and really need us to answer that question. But we can't answer it by ourselves, unfortunately. So we are in conversations with the Department of Labor and making sure we can do that in a way that we don't cut off benefits for folks. And I think there's still some new programming that we have to put in line, because there are new regulations about documentation and identity verification for new applications. And we've been taking the applications, but we need to make sure that they comply with the new documentation requirements.
I think one thing that was really illuminating to me coming into this as a volunteer is the complexity of dealing with the federal government. I mean, even on just the 11 weeks to be added to PUA, you know, I would say, okay, can this be done this week? And it's, oh, we have a new Department of Labor memo on this, and it's 11 pages. And they say, oh, well, wait a minute, there's a gap now in state extended benefits in December for 3 weeks. So you can't add those weeks because of that. And you're like, well, of course you can. We've promised people. And, you know, you go through it and you resolve it, but it is complex, it is arcane, and this is a federal program. So you can't do things unless the Department of Labor says you can do them. And Congress and the president, by waiting, it makes it extremely difficult. One of our recommendations is please just do things in advance. I mean, already they're talking about potentially extending PUA through, you know, perhaps the third quarter of 2021. Well, the strike force advice is if you're going to do it now. Allow that computer programming to be done now so that any problems in reprogramming don't cause delay in benefits. Allow the guidance to come out. So again, this kind of, oh, let's extend it for a month process is really hurting states, and it's really hurting claimants. And it can be avoided.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, everyone, that concludes our event today. Thank you